So I try to explain to people the doghouse at Tyndall Air Force Base and how difficult that process is. And rightfully so, because every decision you make, there is a life directly and indirectly attached to that decision. You are literally learning a new language, learning a new skill set, and having to apply that skill set day in and day out. So if you could, sir, tell me about your experience at the doghouse and going through the undergraduate air battle management training.
I'm the old man in the room, so my experience at the doghouse, it's a bit dated, if I'm being honest, because when I went through back in 2003, wow, that long ago, it was very much tactical fluid control. So remember that continuum of control piece that I was talking about was very much how do I get a fighter and a radar and being able to shoot beyond visual range missiles and survive an intercept, a force-on-force intercept. Now, what the doghouse is doing is night and day and leaps and bounds above that. So Scout McGuire and the guys, and now Lieutenant Colonel Lynch and the rest of the team down there are doing a phenomenal job of making those air battle managers, they're closing that gap on that multi-domain battle each and every day. That information management, that force management, right? So those are the decisions of those skill sets that I mentioned earlier that UABMT, so undergraduate air battle manager trainees, are gaining day in and day out down at the doghouse. So the doghouse is just like a house, right? That house, if that foundation isn't solid, that house will start to slip and sink into the ground. That's what the doghouse does for us. It builds that solid foundations. It gives those undergraduate ABM trainees skill sets of managing information, managing forces, executing the continuum of control, and that integrated surveillance and ID, and being able to do that persistently and simultaneously, more importantly, across the battle space. That's where it starts at the doghouse. Without the doghouse, doesn't really matter if you're on an E3 or an E8 or a CRC because your foundation won't be there. Unfortunately, we will lose American and coalition lives because our inability to execute those five skill sets simultaneously.
One thing I want to do is say thank you to all of the doghouse faculty and staff, from Colonel Lynch to Cookie to Smooth to who used to be JG3. He's now Ram. We have Noko, so many amazing air battle managers, Hulk, and I know I'm going to get beat on for forgetting a few people. We talk about call signs a lot, and a lot of people just don't really understand why we have call signs. Can you explain that for them?
Absolutely. Everybody is a part of a critical team in the Air Force, in the Joint Force specifically. And what the call signs do is allows us to build camaraderie, one. More importantly, though, it allows us to level the playing field in the debrief so that that flight lead may or may not be a captain. He or she may be, brand new, if you will, in his or her flight lead or his or her a section lead if you're an air battle manager. And then if the general, the wing commander, the group commander is flying in that formation as well, that flight lead has responsibility to ensure the safe employment of that flight, or that section lead has the responsibility to ensure the effective employment of that section. What the call sign does is now allows us to level that playing field so that in the debrief, learning can occur without the hindrance of rank or position being introduced in inducing unnecessary bias in there. On top of the camaraderie piece, more importantly, it allows us to level that playing field so that we can all learn from each other and build a more effective fighting force.
So when it comes to a debrief, many people may not know what that is. Sir, what is your definition of a debrief?
So a debrief is based off the intent of the mission, right? So without knowing what you're going to go out there to execute in the first place, just going to go fly around and do some things, okay, it's going to be very difficult to debrief. That's not what we do in the U.S. Air Force, right? We're good stewards of the taxpayers' money. So before we turn one wheel on the flight line, before we fire up one engine, we've already discussed in the mission planning day kind of what the intent of that mission's focus, if you will be. So we go out and we mission plan that mission. We determine what that focus and the objectives to that mission should be. We go and execute it. We bring it back to the debrief, right? Debrief ROE is in effect, just like our previous conversations. Call signs now on the table so that we're kind of laying that, leveling the playing field. And now we debrief to the objectives that we discussed and that we determined on mission planning day. Without having the objectives, in my very humble opinion, you're not debriefing. You're having a conversation about what we did today and kind of, we did some good things, we did some bad things, because without understanding the objectives, assuming the objectives are valid, there is no way to accurately determine whether or not you met those objectives. More importantly, if you didn't meet those objectives, how do you instruct those tangible fixes in order to meet the objective on subsequent sorties? So the way I run my debrief, if you will, first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to reconstruct the mission. All I'm looking for is absolutely tangible, accurate data. X time happened, X event happened. Why? We'll get to in the debrief. And I will do that from the minute that mission started to the minute the mission concluded. Or if there's a section of the mission that directly tied to the objective, if you will, right? And so after the fact finding is completed, or reconstruction, we will determine whether or not we have a debrief focus point. Hear me when I say this. If your debrief focus point does not tied directly to your mission objective, you do not have a debrief focus point. You have something else. You have a conversation piece, a topic to discuss over a whiskey, but you don't have a debrief focus point. So if you're ever struggling to find your debrief focus point, look at the objective first. If it's not directly or tied to the objective, you don't have a DFP, right? So assuming I have the ability to determine an accurate DFP, now, just as you said, I will look and determine line by line, minute by minute, what were those contributing factors, right? More importantly than just determining what the contributing factors were, I have to be able, if I'm going to be the instructor, and here's where I think in some cases we are not consistent in our career field, is just teaching the tangible instructional fix. If you're going to be an instructor, it's very easy to determine what the student did wrong. It's not so easy to teach how to specifically fix that problem. So as I determine those contributing factors to the debrief focus point, I will go line by line. This is where the debrief in some cases could become a little bit long, a little bit tedious, if you will, and take breaks as needed to ensure that the learning occurs, because the whole point of this is to ensure that we maximize our lethality and our effectiveness on the battlefield, and we save American and coalition lives, and we take as many enemy lives as we can as expeditiously as possible. So I continue that process and determining the contributing factors, teaching the tangible instructional fixes until I determine what that root cause is. Once that root cause is determined, now I can teach very specifically a student of mine, if you don't do this step and you do these steps that I teach you, now you have mitigated your debrief focus point, and now you have the ability to meet your objective. So I'll say once again, if you cannot tie your DFP to your objective, you don't have a DFP.